we talk nothing. We talk nothing other than politics, and in context-specific electoral democracy. Once again, a very good morning to you all. My name is Felix Kafuma. I'm hosting you again for another 1-hour show, ACFIM Talks. Today we are discussing the cost of politics. You've all seen so far 4 weeks into the election trail, campaign trail, and what we are already seeing is that our politics is not short of spending. This is not new. Today in the studio, I'll be joined with Emmanuel, the Executive Director of Public Policy Institute. She'll be joining us very soon to discuss the cost of politics. They recently published a book together with NIMD, Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, and Westminster Foundation for Democracy. They had a study that they titled "The Impact of the Cost of Politics on Inclusive Participation in Uganda." You should get yourself this copy and understand how costly or expensive it is to have politics in Uganda, and what are the implications of the rising cost of politics on inclusive participation in Uganda. So we are going to be having discussions in that direction, and very soon we shall be joined by Emmanuel Kitamirike. Before he joins us, allow me to ask all of you to participate in these discussions and conversations on all our social media accounts. You can join us on Facebook. Facebook account is ACFIM. You can also join us on our Twitter account at ACFIM Uganda, so that we can have this conversation going every week, every Friday, 11 to midday. We discuss nothing other than politics, but looking at the electoral politics for that matter. So as Kitamirike joins us, allow me to give you a brief snippet of this report that they produced. They did produce this report, as I said earlier, together with Westminster Foundation for Democracy and then Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy. And in their findings, they argued that overall, the amount of money spent by candidates during the 2016 elections, both primary and general elections, was estimated to be 465 million Uganda shillings. Now, that's not cheap. And when it came to for parliamentary candidates, for that matter, they spent about 237 million Uganda shillings, and then for the LC5 chairpersons as well. So you see that this study is not very far away from the study ACFIM conducted in 2016 that pointed to spending on average that amount of money of about 200 million Uganda shillings to contest. Sometime, I think it was this year, again, ACFIM released another report where they alluded to that anybody who wants to contest for an electoral position, for example, to be an MP in 2021, you need to have not less than at least a bare minimum of 500 Uganda million shillings. So what I was saying here is that you cannot talk about participating in politics as a candidate unless you've checked your war chest. You must have the money. Money talks, and indeed, money is already talking. In our recent studies as well, we've just been showing the bare minimums political parties have spent on their internal party processes, like the delegates conference and party primaries. And I can tell you that close to a bare minimum of 20 billion shillings has been already spent on those processes across the 7 political parties participating in 2021 elections. But also when you look at what we call the study that we are conducting, the preliminary findings are already pointing to higher expenditures. When it comes to the primary findings in that regard, you see that already candidates have been spending an average of 300 Uganda million shillings just before the actual campaign. So it clearly points you to a direction that the cost of politics in Uganda is really shooting through the roof. As we try to get Kitamirike online, allow me to also share that the average amount of money spent by participants during party primaries, according to their study, which I alluded to, was UGX 22 million Uganda shillings. That is, it was in 2016. And then for MP, and at LC5 level, it was 118 million Uganda shillings. And we are now 5 years down the road, and I think those figures must have slightly increased because everything has been shooting up since then. 5 years back is a long time for us to consider that these costs have remained the same. Chances are high, and indeed, they have increased. We've been arguing that for anybody contesting for the highest office in the land, that's the presidency, you need not less than 1 billion shillings. So you can now imagine how our good friends like Katumba are struggling with the cost of campaigns. It already puts bigger questions on the electoral outcomes. It also puts bigger questions on issues of participation. It also puts bigger questions on aspects to do with leveling the playing field. Emmanuel, you are most welcome. Can you now hear us very well? Emmanuel, can you hear us? Okay, Emmanuel, can you hear us? Emmanuel, we're still having a problem hearing Emmanuel, and yet I would want to pick these insights from Emmanuel as he's trying to get online. This study which I'm reading, which is the impact of the cost of politics on inclusive political participation, that was conducted by the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy together with Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and Emmanuel was the lead researcher for this study that was conducted in conjunction with Public Policy Institute. They allude to the fact that majority of the resources the candidates were spending were mainly coming from personal resources and contributions from family and friends. Now, there's a problem when you're discussing source of campaign financing. What does it mean in affecting democracy, electoral democracy? Emmanuel, can you now hear me? Emmanuel, probably I may have to just ask Emmanuel probably shall use the chats and put the questions there so that we can have a discussion either way. Wow, Emmanuel, that's unfortunate. Okay, but as we are trying to get Emmanuel online, give me the honors to introduce Emmanuel as well as we try to get him online. Like I said, he's the co-founder and executive director of Public Policy Institute. And PPI is an independent, non-for-profit public policy and organization development think tank. Is a public policy analyst and specializes in electoral democracy. So we are having the right person to have this discussion. Okay, yeah, I think Emmanuel, you should consider using your phone to get this conversation going. Emmanuel also is has worked as the executive director for Uganda Youth Network, the biggest network that brings together all youth organizations that are addressing the challenge of youth participation. So he worked there and he transformed the OYONET into a national established organization, and he has been leading youth issues for a long time, looking at participation and governance. He has done a lot of expert. Yes, can you hear me now? Emmanuel, can you hear me now? Emmanuel, can you now hear me?
Felix, I hear you, but I didn't get the question properly. Can you repeat again?
Okay. I hadn't inserted the questions. I was still doing the lengthy introductions. You have a very rich CV. Okay. Viewers, you are most welcome once again. Finally, our host, Emmanuel Kitamirike, has joined us, and he found me in the middle of introducing him so that we can make sure that we redeem some time that we've lost. Emmanuel, you are most welcome. It's good to have you. Finally, we can hear you and have this discussion going. Like I was saying to the our online viewers, that you, Emmanuel, is the executive director and co-founder of Public Policy Institute. Public Policy Institute is an independent non-for-profit public policy and organizational development think tank. Recently, you published a book together with Netherlands Institute for Multiparty Democracy and Westminster Foundation for Democracy, a book titled The Impact of the Cost of Politics on Inclusive Political Participation in Uganda. And I want us to pick our discussions from there. I've been looking at this book and studying some of the information that you put across, you put out. For starters, in the study, you indicate that MPs on average in 2016, they spent 465 million, and then LC5, 237.5 million. And if I even shoot that question, I need to understand what really motivated this study. If I get into the bolts and nuts, what motivated this study?
Thank you so much, Felix. Do you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, you're very clear.
Felix?
I can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay. Unfortunately, it's you're breaking a bit, but I am happy to be in this conversation around the cost of politics, building on the report that we conducted as the Public Policy Institute on behalf of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy and the Netherlands Institute for Multiparty Democracy. The report or the study was intended to generate quantitative data regarding actually how much candidates incurred in running for office at parliamentary and local government level. We collected this data at the beginning of this year with a bit of interruption because of COVID. But we're able to conclude it and disseminated the report. Now, there are a couple of interesting findings from this report, some of which you've highlighted in the introductory section. But what is clear from this study is that the cost of running for office in this country is really high and running out of hand, because we estimated that you're looking at 460 million Uganda shillings that one requires, especially if you're going through a political party, to run first leg in the internal party selection process if you want to get the flag of the party, especially for the NRM. Because the NRM elections, as we all know, are adult suffrage, and they were done by lining up across the over 60,000 villages in this country. So you require resources to run that campaign, which is the first phase, and then you require more or less a similar amount of money to run for the general elections. And if you look at this, we estimated that on average, candidates running for Member of Parliament in the 2016 elections spent up to 460 million Uganda shillings in that election. Now, Felix, you and I know very well that there are few Ugandans who can be able to raise this amount of money to successfully run for an election. Therefore, what emerged also from the study is that these figures are exclusive or excluding certain categories of Ugandans from participating in the elections. Ask yourself how many young people in this country are able to raise this amount of money. Ask yourself how many women will be able to raise this amount of money. So in the end, we have designed a political system that really looks at a very insignificant segment of the population that is able to run for this election. So those are the two findings: the cost in terms of quantities, and what is emerging as the impact of the cost on political participation. But also, Felix, in this study, what was emerging is that people don't only spend to run and win elections. They also actually spend to maintain office. And from this study, we, especially members of parliament, were telling us that they spend up to 30 million Uganda shillings monthly to run an office of a member of parliament. And the question was like, oh, first of all, where is this money coming from? And two, what is this money going to? So you have members of, I think, Felix, from your experience as someone who has been doing this, you know that there's a bigger problem with disclosure, people being able to disclose where money is coming from that they put in this election. So they will generally give you generic answers. They will tell you political parties support us. They will tell you personal income. Actually, there are many respondents who say that even when they win political office, they continue to put in their personal resources to maintain office. And then the other question was, what are you spending this money on? And then you have, candidates or respondents who are telling you, we are doing social contributions, that is at the constituency level, where they are spending on burials, they are spending on weddings, they are spending on school fees, and therefore that in one way or the other is responsible for the increasing cost. But also the other thing, Felix, that came out from this study was the amount of money that members of parliament spend on development projects. You know very well that members of parliament are building schools, building infrastructure of roads and bridges in their constituencies, and this in one way or the other is also contributing to the increasing cost of running and maintaining political office.
Wow,
Felix?
Yes. I need to pick it up from there. Just because you are mentioning interesting findings that feed into the preliminary study findings that ACFIM has released yesterday. That what looking at pre-campaign spending and interestingly, there is a relationship because when you look at the pre-campaign expenses so far documented, you will see that many of them are going towards social contributions, welfare, economic empowerment projects, and development projects like schools, which you've been alluded to. But I want to pick it up from where you've just said. These expenditures that are happening at maintaining offices. In your study, I observed that there were regional disparities. You would see, for example, the costs of maintaining an office in the central region was, I think, the highest at 48 million. Then you had, I think, the second highest, Western, at 30 million. Then Northern, 28 million. Then I think Eastern was the least at 25 million. What explains these regional disparities when it comes to spending on maintaining offices on a monthly basis? Emmanuel, did you get my question?
I didn't hear you, Felix. What was the question?
The question was that you've talked about the average cost of maintaining an office on a monthly basis by an MP being 30 million, 32 million, and in your study, rightly, you put it that when it comes to spending patterns, the central region was the highest spending region, with having MP spending more than any other. You actually put the cost at 48 million. Then the second highest spending was Western region at 30 million. And then the least was Eastern at 25 million. What explains these regional disparities when it comes to the average cost of maintaining offices by an MP on a monthly basis? Did you get my question, Emmanuel? Emmanuel, are you there? I think I lost Emmanuel. Okay, as we get Emmanuel back, these are very interesting findings because in our pre-campaign study, which is already alluding to candidates having spent over 200 billion Uganda shillings on a number of projects, especially under the disguise of COVID relief, under the disguise of providing social services, welfare contribution, economic empowerment, development projects, putting up schools. You'll see that it is very clear that the office of an MP has been redefined from legislation to now direct social service provision, from legislation to now direct welfare provision. So it means that you are not necessarily going to have the quality of a legislator you expect when we redefine and refocus the cardinal mandate of an MP. Of course, there have been arguments justifying why MPs have ended up spending money on things that ideally are a reserve and a responsibility of government. One of the arguments has been that they find themselves between a rock and a hard place because the electorate demand for these things, and in true to form, when you move into these constituencies, you realize that many of them suffer from service delivery gaps. And because of that, someone has to step in, and as they step in, they use that not necessarily to address the gap, but also to ride on it, to publicize their candidature and win the hearts of the voters so that they can get to parliament and recover that money either way. So when you have this kind of skewed political representation that is built on direct service provision, on taking over the mandate of the state and negating the mandate of parliament, you start to see that our democracy is taking a wrong turn. It is also important to understand here that most of these electorate have also gotten to a point whereby they no longer trust their leaders. And that explains why in some of them, especially in some of those regions where poverty is a bit more prevalent and predominant, like in the eastern region and the northern region, you see that majority of the electorate prefer to get quick benefits from these candidates in form of addressing or meeting their daily needs, meeting their social needs, as opposed to addressing serious service delivery gaps, like constructing boreholes or providing schools or grading roads. Of course, these regional disparities also are partly explained by, according to the study ACFIM released recently, by the different levels regions have been developing, informing the different needs these regions face. When you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in this case, if I'm to borrow that one, regions from the West are a bit, have moved away from the first tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Their needs are now more collective that lead to more of empowerment, as opposed to the northern and eastern regions that are still on the first tier and second tier of the hierarchy of needs. So this also explains why it's very easily deducible to see expenditures within Western and Northern regions. Western and Central regions are much higher for a candidate than expenditures for Northern and Eastern regions. Because if I'm a candidate contesting in the Western region, instead of contributing towards social welfare, like burials, like school fees, medical bills, I'm now faced with an electorate that wants a road graded. Now, grading a road will cost you between 15 to 50 million, depending on the length of the road and the size of the road and the state the road is in, probably if it needs culverts and all that. So 50 million, translating that into daily needs, that could probably, if I'm giving every person who has a personal need 50,000, those are about how many voters? My quick mathematics says I'm meeting about a minimum of about 100 plus voters. So you see that I'll be spending more money. So if in my constituency, the needs that people are asking for are basically things to do with addressing serious social service delivery gaps, I'll be spending much more money than anybody, than the candidate who is in the north or the east, who is addressing daily needs. So those are the disparities explaining the why in West and Central, a candidate spends much more than East and North. But there are also discussions concerning the source of the money. And before we lost Emmanuel, he had alluded to the fact that whereas politics, the cost of politics is shooting through the roof, it's also apparently clear that the source of the money is in question here, because candidates, many of them allude to using money from their personal savings, from friends and relatives, and also according to the study by PPI, NIMD, and WFD. For those of you who have just joined us, that's the study we are discussing, but I'm also borrowing some of the snippets from our preliminary findings from the ACFIM study on pre-campaign spending. But that study is the impact of the cost of politics on inclusive political participation in Uganda. They alluded to sourcing their monies from mainly personal savings. But I don't think there are very many people who can save 500 million Uganda shillings. So many of them will end up also borrowing that money. But what they do not disclose that also they have financiers who are businessmen with expectations. So because politics is now an investment, with expectations, you find candidates who have picked money from individuals with business expectations, and that becomes dangerous because when these people are elected into positions of authority, the contracting is not based on merit, but it's based on the commitment to fulfill the promises made when picking that money from either loan shark or a financer at that point. So these expectations, these competing expectations and conflicting expectations and interests, for that matter, are putting our leaders in a position where they cannot necessarily be accountable to the electorate, because the electorate in this equation were already paid at a point of transaction when candidates were campaigning. So now when candidates are elected and they are serving in those offices, they must serve the interests and the needs of those who financed them. Because we have a weak architecture of political parties mobilizing resources, weak in the sense that the current law under the Political Parties Organization Act 2005, amended in 2010, that stipulates or requires government to finance political parties on numerical strength for day-to-day activities, but also on equal basis for campaigns, has not necessarily been implemented to the letter. It has mainly focused on one provision that is on day-to-day basis and left out the provision on campaign spending or on campaigning by political parties, and that leaves most of the political parties weak without enough resources. It's also a challenge within political parties that as structured as they are right now, they have struggled to attract many members across board and members who can now contribute in form of membership fees to the running of these political parties. So you see, you have political parties that don't have a big membership base, but even those that have a big membership base, like NRM, for instance, they don't necessarily collect resources from membership. They collect resources from other sources. So the whole notion of political parties raising resources or revenue internally from membership fees remains weak, and that continues to strain the operations and the functionality of political parties. In relation to that, because we're still discussing source and why we find most political parties failing to support party candidates with resources to contest, and then forcing them to pick monies from businessmen, from individuals, from loan sharks, in the process hijacking the mandate, hijacking those leaders when elected to more or less become more predisposed to responding to the needs of those who finance them as opposed to the electorate. That creates a problem because the source of financing talks to the way political party financing is organized in the country, the gaps therein. And also it talks to the way political parties are structured. Because I also must put it out here that most political parties, as of now, have failed to attract members. And when they fail to attract members, we still have many Ugandans who are participating in politics, but not participating through political party structures. So that not only weakens political parties, but it also has gap. It makes it a challenge for multi-party politics to take root in Uganda, because multi-party politics is driven on the functionality and strength of political parties. The same report which we are discussing, beyond discussing the sources and the problems that come with the sourcing of monies political parties spend, it also alluded to another interesting finding that many of the candidates that contested, for example, at LC5 and at MP level, had to spend first they spend within the party primaries, and when they spend within the party primaries, they also come and spend in the main elections. Now, it becomes even more costly when you are participating, for example, in the NRM. When you are participating in the NRM party primaries that are quite costly, and then you find yourself that after spending very much within the party primaries, then you also have to come and spend in the main in the national politics, especially if the constituency you are in has strong candidates from opposition. So those are the challenges here, but what are the ramifications of this cost of politics that is really escalating to astronomical levels? I think when we come back, we can discuss that. Emmanuel, have you been able to connect? Because I was trying to break down this report in relation to what's happening at the moment. Okay, I think I lost Emmanuel for real. We may have to take a break and so we sort this out. Geoffrey, are you there?
COVID-19 lockdown has left us poor. Money from candidates won't make you rich. Do not be desperate. Focus on issues, not money. Often money used in campaigns is dirty money. Do you know its source? Corruption, mafia, drug trafficking, human trafficking, theft from national budget, self-seeking foreigners, selfish businessmen, selfish money lenders. Don't abandon your duty. Elect quality leadership, not big spenders.
Okay, we're back. We lost Emmanuel for sure, but allow me to do a solo show in this case. I'm going to break down this report, by the way, and also relate it to what's happening. This same report I was referring to, it discusses the causatives. Why are we in the situation we are in right now? Why do we have our cost of politics shooting out of the roof? And what does this mean? What are the implications of a very costly political process? Of course, like the factors partly alluded to in this report that are not very different from the studies ACFIM has been doing. One of those is why elections or politics in Uganda has become very costly is the expectations of voters have also since shifted. What am I talking about here? The voters have redesigned, or if not redesigning, they have redeveloped their understanding and how they relate with elected leaders. And this has been happening over time. For instance, we know very well that everyone knows that politics is a very lucrative business. Politics is very rewarding at whatever level you are at, even right from the LC1. Because politics is very rewarding and the electorate know that politics is very rewarding, they have constructed a narrative that every person who is contesting is not necessarily contesting because he wants to represent their interests, but he's contesting because he wants to go, quote unquote, and that person wants to go to a political position to enrich him or herself. In fact, that lays the credence of the common narrative that we are sending you to eat. Eating in this case, referring to the benefits, to the rewards that come with holding a political office. Now, when you have an electorate with that kind of mentality, it means that they will look at you as a political leader as a cash cow. So all their problems, both personal and public, will have to be addressed by anybody who wishes to go and eat. So the politicians have no option, because that's now the context within which they're operating. They have no option other than to spend money on the expectations of the electorate in exchange for that vote. That is one thing. And if you were to talk about solutions of addressing cost of politics, one way would be to make politics less lucrative. What do I mean? Is that I think it's high time we reduced the amount of money, benefits, remuneration we give politicians, especially MPs, because that alone has attracted very many people to that position. When you talk to a number of youths who have joined politics right now, because we have a good number of them, many of them, if they're honest to themselves, they'll tell you that they're joining politics because it's a job. Politics has now been deconstructed from service to a job. So when you treat it as a job, it means that you have to go there with targets, and those targets must translate into how much you earn from that job. And because those targets must translate how much you earn from that job, the stakes become higher. So to join any political office, you must fight for it, and you fight for it using the pockets. And the deeper your pockets are, the higher the chances of accessing that office. So that's where we are. But also the other factors that have pushed politics to be quite costly is the fact that we have, as a country, we have never really moved from the merit system. You see people come and contest under political parties, but when a voter is making that choice, eventually it boils down to an individual, not the party. And it means that as an individual, you must find all ways and mechanisms of financing your campaigns. And because now people do not necessarily come through parties, then you have many who come as independents. Even those who come as independents, some come as independents through a party that failed to manage the party primaries, to bring flag bearers. So at the point of contact and exchange with the voters, these voters don't necessarily look at flag bearers with the perspective that is belonging to party A or party B. They look at that individual in his capacity as a candidate, not as a party flag bearer. And now that all that transfers the cost to the individual. So the individual in this case has to spend money as an individual, not as a party, and is spending that money in a constituency that is bogged down with a number of problems and challenges. I also must add that service delivery, the way it is right now, we seem to see a very absent state when it comes to providing services. And when the state is very absent in providing services, yet social services is the first, those are programs where the state relates with the citizenry. And those are the areas where the state accounts the citizenry. And that's an area, or that's the space where the state exercises its mandate and authority over the citizenry. Unfortunately, this is a space where the state is absent. Now, when this state is absent in that space, other actors come and occupy it. When those actors come and occupy it, and those actors are politicians, when they come and occupy that space, to occupy that space effectively means that you must address the social service gaps that exist in that space. So because you must address the social service gaps that exist in that space, it means eventually you'll end up spending. And when you end up spending, when you fill that space and void and you end up spending, you are not spending small monies. You see, the reason why those social services or public services are a preserve of the state, it's because, one, they are common goods, but two, they are very expensive. We're talking about infrastructure development. We're talking about human development interventions. These are very expensive ventures. So when you have a politician take on the role of government, it inadvertently means that he's going to spend a lot of money. And the politician is taking advantage of that space, not because he feels so much for the constituency, or because he feels so much touched by those gaps in the constituency. It's mainly because that space is so good to occupy and take advantage of to popularize your candidature and win you a seat, a political seat, whether in parliament or at LC5 local government level. So that definitely has to make the cost of politics shoot. That's where we are as a country. Let's look at the current politics now. Already we are coming 4 weeks into the campaign period. Somewhere in January, I think the second week of January, we shall be heading to the polls. In what we've called the scientific elections, the first almost 1 month of these elections has been not short of action and drama. Unfortunately, it's not good drama for Uganda and the politics of Uganda. It is drama that borders more on violence, borders more on the what some of us observers are seeing as the unfortunate absence of control and firm grip of the Electoral Commission in this process. But even as many of the people within the public realm are seeing violence, the major punctuation of our elections so far, behind the scenes, candidates are spending. I know for a fact from our preliminary findings and observations as ACFIM, candidates have been spending a lot of resources in trying to sell their candidature. The covert door-to-door campaigns present another avenue through which candidates are spending. By every household they reach out to, they don't just promote or publicize or market their candidature by just reading out their manifesto. No. Like I told you earlier, that we have an electorate that has since changed and shifted in mindset and expectations. So in every household they go to, they are forced to leave behind a pack. That pack could contain household items. Those ones are bought, they're not for free. Sometimes they leave behind money in each household. So before, where they were campaigning through open rallies, now they are campaigning through door-to-door, which I think also now door-to-door presents or makes the candidate have more direct interaction with the voter. And every time you give a voter an opportunity to directly interact with the candidate, be sure that you are going to address the personal needs of that voter. And addressing the personal needs of that voter means that you will end up spending money directly, money and also spending on household items. So we are seeing spending in that direction, but we're also seeing spending that has been structured in the form of groups, women groups, youth groups, all those forms of groups that have been formed, and monies are being channeled there in this case of self-empowerment. Candidates are spending in that direction. We are also seeing candidates being very active on social events, on weddings, they are attending burials, they are attending all sorts of community meetings that give them access to voters. And in all those meetings, they finance, facilitate, give money on top of the other smaller meetings that they allowed them to convene according to the SOPs and EC guidelines. So you see that there are patterns of spending that are being used, that have cropped up, that are being used by the candidates in the current context of what we have called the scientific or hybrid elections, quote unquote. Now, all that is done to reinforce the already known forms of spending that at least many of us are able to see. The use of media, radio, TV, social media right now is a very highly constant avenue. You also look at the spending that is going into these public address systems, the road drives that keep moving to publicize the candidate, the billboards and the posters. So those are already expenses that almost everyone is seeing. But the ones that I've been sharing with you are the expenses that we are calling the behind the scenes expenses candidates are incurring. So there have been arguments whether the cost of politics would be cheaper or to be more expensive in the current context of campaigns that we are having in 2020, 2021 elections. That, like I said, I don't see us as a country spending less on politics. If the figures we are quoting were for 2016, and in 2020 we alluded to the minimum requirement for an MP to be 500 shillings, Uganda shillings, 500 million Uganda shillings, sorry for that. It means that we don't expect candidates spend any much less in these elections, even when the context is different. Probably the new dimensions could even push the cost of elections, the cost of politics, much higher. As I move into my final segment, what does it mean and what can we do? This means that it will be very difficult for youth, for women who don't have access to such resources to contest in a very costly or in a monetized political environment. Like I've said before, politics is not the way we are now structured. Politics is not for the poor. Even those youths you see that have contested in politics, probably they have godfathers that are financing them. They have people who are helping them to realize and mobilize those resources. But the challenge with that though is that people of good ideas, people of integrity, who don't have resources, will not be able to compete or offer themselves as leaders. And that will affect the quality of leadership we have right now. And I'm so sure that doesn't surprise you with the quality. Every year, the quality of debate in Parliament has been declining. For some of us who have been observing and monitoring the parliaments over time, I think for the past 5-7 terms, we can agree that every year we have a parliament full of jokers. We have a parliament that is self-centered. We have a parliament where the quality of debate is very, 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 very shallow and poor. And you cannot run away from the process. The process that gives us leaders is where the problem is. You don't expect to have a good meal when you did not put the right ingredients in that meal. So we are in this space of scarcity of good leaders because of what money has created. Money has provided an avenue for only those who have money to become leaders, political leaders. And in most cases, those who have money may not necessarily also have the integrity, the credibility, the good ideas to offer good leadership. So that's the crisis when it comes to the leadership crisis Uganda is facing right now. So already it's affecting the leadership quality, it's affecting participation, it is locking out youth, it's locking out women. Women don't have access to these resources. And there's another debate around women and accessing campaign financing, which I don't want to go into right now, but we're now discussing what are the effects. So you also see that because it has become transactional, you do not have leaders that are responding to the needs and aspirations of the electorate that they are representing. So, and the cycle of poor service delivery, the cycle of poverty continues. When you talk about corruption in Uganda, I think right now Uganda's biggest problem is political corruption. And this is the corruption that is driven by the politics of the day. And when you talk about politics of the day is, you see, you must understand that the allocation of resources is a political process. And when you have politicians, self-seeking politicians, sitting on the table to allocate who gets what do you expect? So when you talk about political corruption in this case. We are talking about corruption that is fueled by political leaders. And that's the biggest problem Uganda is having right now. So all those are the ramifications of the high cost of politics in Uganda. And we are seeing it, we are feeling it. But we must do something about it. What can we do? Quickly, in about 3 or 4 minutes. First things first, we can't run away from the current financing architecture that we have. So in that way, we also have to look at the law. What are the laws governing the financing of elections? What are the laws governing the financing of political parties, for example? I think more than ever before, Uganda needs a law, an independent law, an elaborative law to regulate campaign spending. This has been the cry of ACFIM since 2015. That law will be able to put in place requirements for disclosure of sources of campaign financing. You know the problems that are surrounding the disclosure element. The more opaque, the more closed, the more inaccessible public is towards the financing, the sources of money and the financing of political parties, the more dangerous path Uganda is taking in terms of cultivating multi-party dispensation. So that law is important. That embeds provisions on disclosure, embeds provisions on putting a limit on spending, embeds provisions on transparency, making public how much a candidate is spending, and also how much a candidate plans to spend, so that we can monitor, track, and observe and ensure that most of that money that is going into this process is not money from corrupt proceeds. It's not money from illicit financing. It's not money from wrong elements of the state. In our study, as I conclude, we've observed that when you have many civil servants joining politics, because right now civil servants are the biggest raw material for the current political candidates we are having, it sends signals, because if we've been discussing that contesting you require a minimum of 500 million, I understand how much a civil servant is earning. If you have many of civil servants leaving their jobs to join politics, where are they getting that money? Doesn't it bother you that there is possibly a relationship between the poor service delivery, because civil servants preside over service delivery, and their interest in politics now, and not just politics, but entering into a place where they're going to spend a lot of money? So I think there is a connection there. We need to interest ourselves on why are we having civil servants all of a sudden preferring to be in politics and having money for that money to spend in politics, when the places they are living have had questions around accountability and quality of service provision. I'll leave that to you to answer. But I think it's high time we had a conversation around that area, looking at the sources, the raw materials, where most political candidates are coming from, and what is motivating them to abandon what they are doing to join politics. We were supposed to have Emmanuel today. Unfortunately, we had him for a few minutes, then we lost him. We had a technical glitch, but I had to keep the conversation going. I've briefly touched the snippets of the report. As I sign out, I'm also encouraging the electorate out there that at the end of it all, that ballot is not just a paper. That ballot means a lot to you. That ballot is your next quality of service provision. It is your next quality of leader. It's your next Uganda. So exercise with a lot of respect. Exercise your choice in a manner that secures your future, not just in words, but secures your future in terms of quality of life, your life, and the quality of your next 5 years, whichever party is going to be in charge of this country. Make the right decision. Don't base your decision on how much you've gotten from a candidate. Base your decision on the integrity of the candidate, on the ability of the candidate, on the practicability of the manifesto the candidate presents to you. Thank you so much. It's been a good conversation. Next time, same place. I remain Felix Kafuma, your moderator. Bye-bye. God bless.
The monster of money politics is eating up Uganda's democracy. When you take money from a candidate, it means you are feeding the monster. Then you become a part of the problem. When a candidate who overspends on campaigns is elected, he or she will not represent voters, but himself. He or she will engage in corruption to recover campaign money. Social services will not be delivered and the voter will suffer more. Voter, let's be wise. Give democracy a chance. Do not sell your vote. Focus on the issue.